Begin Self-Publishing, episode 101, Book Publicists with Ben Cameron.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
In this show, I talk to Ben Cameron, who runs Cameron Publicity and Marketing, which is a book publicity company. They're very much from the traditional idea of book publicity, which is mainly a PR-based function, but it started to take on a little bit of the social media side of things. So these are guys who are used to publicising books, and that's basically what they do for a living. It's a very different take to what we heard in Tyler Anderson's interview. And in fact, I actually asked the same question as which books would he prefer to publicise, and I get a very different answer to it in that show. So now over to the interview. Hi, Ben. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim.
Hi. So you're obviously a book publicist. Why do you think it is a good idea for authors to use a book publicity service?
The first thing is that obviously authors need to do something to get their books known and seen, make them stand out of the pack. And publicists do that. So mainly what we do is outreach to media contacts, but we do lots of other things as well. But what we have is a certain level of skill and a certain level of time that we put into promoting your book that you might not be able to do. So we've got contacts, people that we know well and work with all the time, and we know what sort of content they're after. So we can fit your books or something about you into that content, that whether it's in newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, or online. So we try to match up authors and books with what the media has to offer. And it's really a skill. It's about selling ideas. It's salesmanship. But it's not a thing that we're selling. It's ideas. We're selling what you have to offer. And authors often struggle to do that sort of thing themselves. It's difficult for people to talk about themselves oftentimes, and they often don't want to spend the time doing that. The other thing I'd say about why to hire a publicist is that publicity isn't just about sales. Often people, when an author is looking at promoting the book or doing any activity towards their book, they've got the cost and they've got the number of books that they need to sell in order to make that money back. Publicity just doesn't work like that. It's really hard to pin down the amount of sales that you'll get in response. And often when you're looking at it in that sort of way, you miss the big picture, the real opportunities that can come of it. So we have authors who sell a lot of books as a result of a publicity campaign, but we also have authors who get an agent because, that they did something in a publicity campaign that got them noticed, or they get a publisher. If it's an author who does want a traditional publishing contract, we have worked with plenty of authors who have gotten that as a result of a publicity campaign. Or they might become known as an expert in the media and be asked back time and time again and get paid for those sorts of appearances. They might write an article for a newspaper, and that's something that obviously looks good on your CV and is good, for you moving forward as well. So there are lots of different things that can come of a publicity campaign, and I'd just caution anybody who's just looking at the bottom line, the money, to really consider that it is about putting yourself out there, risking being known, and lots of things can come to you.
Okay. Now, a question that I've certainly fallen foul of in the past, but how long before a book is going to be released would you suggest the best time for an author to be contacting a publicist?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have people all the time who come to us 2 weeks after publication and say, why isn't my book selling? I just realized I need to do something. And we can, work with them to some degree even then. But really what you want to do is be in touch with somebody, a good 6 months before. It could be before your book is completed or edited, and, find out what the opportunities are, what the cost is. Crucially, you need to budget that in. And then when it comes to actually doing publicity, some media work very far in advance and other media don't work far in advance. So things like glossy monthly magazines, if you have a book that would be relevant to a monthly magazine or a quarterly magazine even, you need to be approaching them, or a publicist needs to be approaching them 5-6 months in advance. So they're, going to be working on their Christmas issues quite soon. Whereas other media like radio interviews, you can arrange something, possibly for the week after. So they move very quickly. So taking all that into account, get in touch with the publicist as early as you can, even if it's just fact finding, and then take some advice from them on, when the campaign should actually run. And it might be something that we do often is split campaigns. So we might do 2 weeks of a campaign, 3 or 4 or 5 months ahead of the publication date, and then do the rest of it right up to the publication date.
Okay. And you obviously mentioned a bit about PR and radio interviews and things. What kind of activities should a good publicist be doing for an author?
So make sure you talk to, your publicist and really get a feel for what they do. And it can vary from publicist to publicist. For us, the first thing we would do is a press release. We are then contacting contacts in the media. So like I said, across TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and online media. That's including bloggers as well. We do some social media services as part of a publicity campaign. So we'll tweet. We'll post on Facebook from our accounts when there's coverage and encourage you to do so as well. But we also have other extra social media services. We can help you get set up and train you in social media if you don't know anything about it. And social media is quite important, and it's generally important that the author does it themselves so that it's authentic and comes from them. So we don't want to be doing people's social media long term, but we're more than happy to get people up and running and make sure that they understand what they're doing. So in the course of a campaign, there might be interviews. Hopefully there will be interviews, and we'll arrange those. We'll give an author advice how to do them, what to expect, hold their hands through it. Usually we'll even, if it's someplace we can get to fairly easily, we'll go along, even if it's their first interview, just to make sure that they're comfortable and that they know what they're doing. We also have advertising services, so we can do online advertising. That's something that we've just recently started doing, but it's big now, and it's getting quite important for authors to consider that as a way of going. We can do trailers, we can run NetGalley campaigns, all sorts of things that we do. It's probably worth saying as well what we don't do. We don't, because a couple of things might surprise people. We don't organize launch parties. Some publicity companies might, but we don't. So what we can do is invite people to launch parties. So we don't get involved in the sort of who the caterers are or, where it should be. And usually authors are perfectly comfortable, going down to the local bookshop or wherever and arranging it themselves. But we can invite the media. So we can send invitations out to, your local media or any, relevant media, and try to get them to come. And the other things that we don't do are awards and festivals. And the reason we don't do awards and festivals is because the date for submitting authors and books for those can be, 6, 8, 10, 12 months ahead of when the things actually occur. So, the time that we're working on an author probably isn't going to coincide with when they need to submit for those things. But if we're working with an author and they keen to do a festival, we can certainly give them the contacts and give them everything that they need to know to get in touch with that person.
Okay, so obviously we've done with what a good publicist should be doing. What should an author be doing to get the most out of a publicist? How should the author themselves be acting?
It's really important that authors understand that they are an integral part of their campaign. It's not just a button that you push. You don't just give somebody some money and they go away and do it, and it has kind of nothing to do with you. You need to be a part of the campaign, and you need to really make sure that you can work with the person that you're hiring. So get to know them, get to know what their services are, get to know what they're like. Make sure that they're going to give you updates, regular updates, and that you're always going to know what's going on. So you should always have a general idea of what kinds of things that they're pitching at any time. So it might be this week I'm going to be pitching to radio stations. I'm going to be pitching this sort of angle to radio stations. Or next week it might be newspapers. So make sure that you're working with somebody who's going to keep you informed. Also make sure that they understand your goals and your expectations, and that they say if they don't think your goals and expectations are realistic. So, if your goal is to be on the front page of the Times and they don't say that's really difficult or that's impossible, then you need to be concerned, because, you don't want somebody who's just going to tell you everything you want to hear and then go away and not do any of it. What you want is somebody who's going to work with you to come up with the angles to achieve as much as possible. And be really nice to your publicist. I always tell that to everybody. It's really important that you're really nice to them, but be a little bit pushy as well.
Yeah.
So just make sure that they're working on the things that you agreed. Push them along a little bit if you need to, but be really nice about it. Another important thing is often publicists will ask you for any contacts or any media recommendations that you have, in any place that you think might be relevant. And the immediate thought of most authors is that your job? And it absolutely is, but we just want to make sure that we don't miss anything out. So, we've got lots of contacts in all sorts of areas, pretty much any subject matter. We have worked with people in that area. But if there's something, if your book is in the specialist area and there's some media, a podcast that you listen to all the time that you really love, for example, it's your dream to be on that, make sure you say, and, we'll do everything that we can to achieve that. And then at the end of the publicity campaign, just make sure that you understand what the publicist has, achieved, what, ongoing things need to be looked after, what they're going to do in the future, because most queries for publicity often don't come in, the first few weeks of a campaign. That can come in well after a campaign is over. So, what are they going to do, if somebody asks about a book 6 months from now, and that happens often. So make sure that they're going to either take care of it or they're going to pass it on to you and in a way that you can know what to do with it.
All right. So, I think you deal with both traditionally published and self-published authors. Have you noticed any differences between the attitudes of self-published authors and the traditionally published authors that you work with?
Not so much. It's tempting to say that self-published authors are more demanding because they pay the bill. They know the clock is ticking in a way that traditionally published authors aren't. So for traditional published author, we are an extension of their publisher, and it's just something that kind of happens automatically with them. With a self-published author, it's something that we've worked out specifically for them, and and there's a price and there's an amount of time, and they're always aware of that. But, in fact, it doesn't tend to work out so much like that because the personality of the author matters so much more about how easy it is to work with somebody or how willing they are to do things, how able they are to do things, interviews and things like that. So it can vary so much from campaign to campaign that it's difficult to really make a distinction.
Okay. And obviously you've been doing this for a while now. How much does genre and book subject affect how you publicize a book? I mean, does it vary a lot between genre?
Yeah, that is everything, in fact. So the way we would publicize a science fiction novel is completely different than the way we'd publicize a book by a sex therapist, for example. One would be aimed more at blogs and more at fan sites and specific reviewers who review genre fiction. And then the other would be aimed at more like, television programs like This Morning. I use the example of the sex therapist because we had one who was on This Morning a few months ago, and she got asked back, a couple of times since then. So that's a very different sort of campaign. The key is that before you get started, that your publicist should have worked out, what sort of targets they're going to have for you, and what they think they can achieve for you, and what they don't think they can achieve for you.
Okay, I'm going to spring a surprise question on you, which I'll ask somebody
Fantastic.
else. If somebody came into your offices and they were basically holding a proof copy of a book they're going to publish in 3 months, let's say, what would be the book that you would think, great, this would be the easiest book to publicize in the world, and what would be the worst kind of book for you in terms of what you see at the moment, in terms of what would be the most work for you to publicize?
The most work for us to publicize would be something very niche. Poetry, for example. We don't generally cover poetry, something that's very, a nonfiction book about a very small subject area. We generally don't do. It needs to be something that can break out into more mainstream media for us to really be able to do it. Otherwise, what we're doing, all of our activity is aimed at just a few outlets. That's really difficult because if somebody says no, that's your campaign. Whereas if it's a more general book, if it appeals to lots of different kinds of outlets, then there's so many opportunities. And when you're running a campaign, you don't really know what's going to take off and what isn't. So you might be running a campaign that's sort of a travel book about skiing, for example. And so you're pitching it to travel editors. You could also be pitching it to skiing magazines. And you might find that the skiing magazines aren't that interested, but the travel editors are really interested. You adjust what you're doing to aim it more towards the travel people. And that's what you're doing during a campaign. So the more different kinds of opportunities, more different kinds of subject areas or media types that we can pitch a book at, the better, the more we can do with it.
Okay. So I think we've just about covered all the fundamentals. How can people find out about Ben Cameron and Cameron Publicity and Marketing?
So Cameron Publicity and Marketing is a small agency. There are 5 of us, and I'm in charge. And you can reach us at our website is www.cameronpm. That's PM for Publicity and Marketing .co.uk. So cameronpm.co.uk. Or you can reach us by phone on 020-7917-9812. Or you can email me directly. My email address is ben, B-E-N, @cameronpm.co.uk. Also, if I could give a shout out for an event that we have coming up in September. It's a self-publishing masterclass. And more information about that is at www.selfpublishingmasterclass.org. It is an event where I am speaking amongst other people. So the other speakers are Jessica Bell, Roz Morris, and Robin Cutler, who cover design and layout, editing, and production. And between us, we're going to talk people through the entire self-publishing process. So it's ideal for those real beginners. It's on September 23rd, and you can, if you go to the website, you can find out more about that.
That and your telephone number are London-based, aren't they?
Yeah, we are, UK-based. We run publicity campaigns in the UK, Republic of Ireland, and English language media throughout Europe. If you're interested in publicity in other places, we can certainly recommend people. We have publishing partners who can do things in the US, for example, in Canada and India and Australia. So do get in touch, but our focus is the UK.
Yeah, because I've got quite a large number of US listeners. I thought I'd put that out before they try ringing the number and end up with some pizza place in Kentucky or something.
That's right. I mean, it's worth saying we do work with a lot of American authors who want publicity in the UK. It might be that the book has a relevance or it's a place that they have an affinity to for some reason. And often we work with British authors who want to publicize their books in the US and Canada, in which case we introduce them publicity partners. So don't dismiss the UK as an outlet. It's a big publicity outlet.
Okay. Well, it's great to have you on the show today, Ben.
Great to talk to you, Tim.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.